Hello, everybody. I hope that you can hear me. By the way, let me know if you can hear me. Hello, greetings from Finland. Yep, very, very good. Okay, so I see that we have so many people joined already. We have already almost 100 people joined, and let's get started right away. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's excited to have people joining us all around the globe, and please let us know in chat where are you joining us. It would be exciting to know where are you from. As said, we are sending all greetings from Finland, and today we will talk about what's after NPS, emotional experience, is dominating the CX market. So let's get started with some housekeeping. I am Eveli Kaasikku, and I am your host today. At my everyday work, I'm also a marketing manager at Feedbackly, and our today's stars are two emotional experience pioneers, Minna, Killström, and Jaakko, Männistö. So we can see Jaakko as well. Yay! Hello, Jaakko.
Hey.
And do we have Minna as well here? I'm sure that Minna will wave us as well. Just
to be honest, actually, I had some connectivity issues and I had to reboot while you already started. So the platform definitely has some issues ongoing, but hopefully we get to go through.
Oh well, it's always so with in today's world, right? Technology has this side as well. I'm sure that Minna will be shortly on board as well with us, and she will wave to us then. And but we still have actually some housekeeping parts to go through before we go to presentations. And please, anybody, if you have any questions, face any issues on your side, on the audience side as well, just let us know in chat, and we will tackle them immediately. But let's go forward right now with housekeeping, and whenever you have questions, then please write them to the chat as well, as mentioned. And after Minna's and Jaakko's presentations, we will also have some time for Q&A, where we will answer any questions that you might have. So we will have a nice time for Q&A at the end of the webinar. And just a reminder, then this webinar is also recorded, and all of you will also receive a recording of this webinar to your email so that you can look back to all the great ideas shared here. And before I give a word to Minna and Jaakko, then I would like to quickly go through formal part and also thank our partners, because without them we wouldn't be here. So this webinar is organized by CXforum. CXforum is a global CX network. It is built by passionate CX professionals for other CX and marketing professionals just like you. So it is a non-profit organization, and our goal is to share the knowledge and spark great discussions to help businesses to create happier customers all around the world. And in addition to the webinars, we deliver latest CX news, great extensive global research reports, and one of the most valuable, perhaps also actually one of the most used opportunities is definitely meetings with industry experts. And yeah, so we have grown pretty big and we are global, and we're great to have you with us today at this webinar as well, where we are also doing part of our mission to share the great CX knowledge. But again, great things are not possible with great partners. So this exact webinar is brought to you by 2 sponsors. And the first one is Feedbackly. Feedbackly is a CX management software, but it also provides CX consultation and trainings. And today, Feedbackly is actually the only CX software that can measure also human emotions. And our second sponsor is Australian-based CX software CarePage. And CarePage provides, as said, CX software, but this is more specifically designed for health and aged care, disability and home care, and retirement. So that's it from our formal part of the webinar. And actually, it's now time for the really, really interesting webinar ahead to talk more about the emotional experience. But before I give a word to our speakers today, then I have one question to you, to our audience. And this question popped up right now in the chat as well. And you can click on the poll number 1, and there you go. The question is, what would you like to learn today? So, and you can find there also 4 answers: that what is emotional experience and why it is important, or how can I collect data about our emotional experience, about your emotional experience, and which KPIs to use for analyzing emotional experience. And the 4th answer is that how to use emotional experience data to improve your business growth. So I can see that answers are already coming in. Very nice. So most of the people would like to learn more about which KPIs to use for analyzing emotional experience and how to use emotional experience data to improve business growth. So very practical questions, actually. So Jaakko, what do you think about these answers? Are they surprising?
All right, very good. And at the same time, I will say that as we have a little bit of platform issue, as any time we can imagine, Minna sent a message that she would need a re-invitation to the platform, and she will join right after. But thank you for the question, and I would say that from my perspective, doesn't surprise too much. And for the reason for that is that right now, pretty much everyone, if we're looking at from the technical perspective or from our customer base on feedback side or discussion around CXforum, most of the discussion is going around emotional experience. But the fact is that there is not too much solution or methodologies to actually handle it and make it very practical. So that's definitely something that we're gonna discuss a little bit more on my my keynote today on how to try to make it a little bit more practical. And based on the feedback that you guys gave me last time on the discussion, I made it a little bit even more practical. And now we have also a next study showing that other like what kind of practical approaches we might have to emotional experience and emotional experience measurement on real life cases, and what were actually the things that were considered as points that really made it happen, and on what kind of cases or what were the kind of like the don't do points on those as well. So I'm going to be talking about a little bit more on the best practices around emotional experience measurement on a practical level as well. So that's a good question, and definitely coming up answering that as well.
Yeah, maybe great to know that we had this webinar also in Finnish language, and this had as well hundreds of registrants and participants, and it was very, very warmly welcomed, and that's actually a reason also why we thought that it's great to have this webinar also in English. So that's where Jaakko was also referring when he was talking about the feedback. But it now takes a little bit time to get Minna back on board. But Jaakko, I think it's good if you go forward with your presentation. Give a little bit of introduction about yourself as well. I can say that Jaakko has actually, or Jaakko is an awarded CX professional. He has been awarded by many places, but definitely one of them that's worth bringing out is that he also was under, or in the Forbes 30 under 30 list. So that's great. But actually, Minna, do we have you on board now as well?
I believe so. Yes.
Yes. Very good.
Sorry about the technical difficulties.
It's good. It's good. Well on
Eventually
time, and it's very well on time. So let's get started. And in this case, now that we have Minna, then let's start with Minna's presentation. It's a great introduction to Jaakko's. So now, Minna, why not to give a few words about yourself? I know that you have also very great achievements on your career. Minna, by the way, is a PhD of economics, and she is also an author. She has written a book about emotional experience, so definitely an expert on emotional experience field. So here you go. Now we can see your presentation as well, and we are excited to hear more about it all.
All right. You can see it properly then, can you?
Yes, it
brilliant.
Looks
sorry, I got a little confused with all the technical issues, so few minutes to get back oriented here.
All yes, right. And again, our audience, we very apologize, but I believe that we are now back on track, and it's well on time. It's now time for great presentations.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, and good afternoon, good morning. Great to be here. My name is Minna Killström, and customer insights and developing customer experience has been somehow related to everything that I do in my work history. So I've been working is in an insurance company, creating better experiences, then as an CX consultant, and now working with major B2B customer insights at Neste. Neste is the world's largest producer of renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel refined from waste and residues. Please go and check it out, neste.com. So now there. But maybe a year ago, about I became a published author when my first book about customer experience and emotional connection was published. Unfortunately, it is in Finnish, but feel free to contact the publisher, Alma Talent, if you would like to see it translated into English. When I was preparing this presentation, I spent quite a lot of time thinking about the wordings, how to talk about this topic in English. Should I talk about emotion experience, which is a straight translation of the Finnish terminology that I use? But then I decided to talk about emotional connection instead, and how to create that. It's a little bit different, but it somehow resonates to me a bit better. But feel free, please share your thoughts on this. I'd be happy to hear what kind of terminology would you find best and why. Little bit maybe about why I got interested about emotion and customer experience. A few years back, when I was working as a customer experience consultant, there were first signs of how emotions would be the next big thing for customer experience management. And I got really interested about the topic, and I noticed that there are not that much written on it, and all the knowledge was really scattered. I had to spend quite a lot of time to figure out what emotions are all about and how they affect us all. And then I had to figure out which parts of all that literature were meaning for customer experience. After reading through a lot of literature and having many discussions with other CX professionals, I decided to gather all the knowledge that I've collected into a book. And now I'm really happy to notice how much interest this subject is now having. All CX professionals seem to be interested about it and are eager to know how to manage emotions. Maybe I'll start with the quote from research company Forrester from 2019 from their CX Index report. This is a quote. CX performance is mostly flat, but showing early signs of making gains, with leading brands relying on emotion to build loyalty. And then 2 years later, 2021, this is a quote again from their research report. The highest scoring brands understood the key emotional needs of their customers and provided emotionally pleasing experiences. They also developed a core group of loyal customers, those willing to forgive brands' mistakes, pay a premium for their products, keep their business with their brands, and spend more over time. So, connection with value creation is quite clear, I'd say. So, I have here 15 to 20 minutes, so I thought I'd talk about emotions and customer experience through themes that are essential when thinking about value creation and growth. So I'll point 3 reasons why you should get interested in creating emotional connection with your customer. The first reason is that a touch point will always evoke emotions, and they will affect it. They will affect the experience you provide for your customer. This will happen always, whether or not you try to manage the emotions. That's why I'm saying that evoking emotions is easy. Customer experience will always raise feelings, and your task is to try to create the right ones. Those emotions that will support your brand's strategic goals. So what we're talking about here is emotional experience management, about planning and managing emotions and feelings of customer while using a product or service. It's also about designing your touch points in a way that they evoke the intended emotions, and if they don't, you know how to correct that situation. It's all about managing emotions rather than just measure afterwards how the customer experienced your product or service. We've learned to use emotions in marketing and especially in advertising, but when talking about managing emotions in customer experience, the topic is still newer and not so well known. But as Paul Ekman says, emotions change how we see the world and how we interpret the actions of others. And this is also true with customer experiences. Humans are driven by feelings. So if you want your customer to remember your product or brand, they must be engaged and impassioned by the interaction with your company. And to achieve the highest emotional response, you should target your customer through many different senses. For example, think about the colors and shapes on your product packaging or the interior of your store. How do they make customers feel? Consider the words and messages. Are they emotive and engaging? All interactions with your brand should give customers a certain feeling or emotion. So be consistent. But which emotions to drive? How they affect us and on our behavior? In general, positive emotions build trust. Happiness is an emotion that creates loyalty, and you'll feel you want to be close to something that's providing you happiness. Similarly, negative emotions such as frustration or anger makes you take some distance to the product or service and eventually push you to use the competitor's product or service. One example is disgust. It's often a reaction to stimulus that we should best avoid. It's often contextual and subjective. It places limits on our behavior. For example, a dust ball in a fitting room might do the same, pushing you forward from that. It can make you feel disgusted, and you might want to leave the dress to the fitting room and then probably end up buying a dress from another store. So disgust makes you take distance. And for example, not to be able to use an application or a digital service online might make you feel ashamed. And a shame is a feeling that makes us hide, and therefore you'll probably won't share your experience with anyone. Because you might interpret that you just couldn't do it, even though it might be caused by a bad design. And when you feel ashamed, you would probably not give feedback, and the designer would never hear about what happened. However, if you would feel angry, the case would be probably different. You would call the contact center and tell how bad the application or website was. Anger then is an emotion that makes us feel strong and powerful. It makes us defend ourselves. Angry person will contact the customer service and post their opinion to social media and tell all their friends about the experience which make them angry. What's good about it is that the designer will probably know about what went wrong. So the behavior is totally different whether you feel shame or anger, and the both are negative feelings. So this is the logic why you should be interested about knowing the particular emotions that your customer is experiencing. Of course, things are not this simple. There are always deeper questions like, what does happiness mean? How do I create it? What other emotions should be evoked in different touch points with our brand? And because this is not simple, the answer is that you need to know your customer and their expectations and ways of behaving in the touch points. And the key themes here are consistency and working towards the strategic targets. One thing is certain though, you can't build emotional connection without having personnel who works in the atmosphere that's supporting the creation of positive emotions. The word connection here is important. It refers also to the fact that this is a two-way relationship. Emotional connection is built together by working for a common purpose and building emotional connection with personnel. You can't just glue an emotional connection to a service like a sticker. It needs to be built deep together with all the organization. Then the next one. According to research by Deloitte, 62% of consumers feel they have a relationship with the brand, therefore reflecting the qualities of a positive relationship. Brand can create connections which create customer loyalty. One of the most important being empathy and communication. They also point out that one important part here is knowing which data is okay to use and when. This is one of the cornerstones in building and maintaining trust with customers. So let's then talk about the value. This is a really interesting research, opening about the logic on how emotional connection creates value. It's published by HBR about 6 years ago. The main points here are, it is not enough to have customers who are merely satisfied. Payoff is much greater when companies connect people emotionally. Customers who form an emotional attachment to the brand are 52% more valuable. Emotionally connected customers buy more, visit more often, are less price sensitive, pay attention to your communication, and recommend you. They talk to their friends and family about you and recommend you in social media. So quite simple. The researchers found emotional motivators which drive the emotional connection. These motivators are the deep, often unspoken desires of the customers. The strongest ones found were feeling sense of belonging, standing out from the crowd, have confidence in the future, and protecting the environment. These emotional motivators differ from category to category, meaning that different motivators drive loyalty, for example, in restaurant or in a hardware store, a little bit different. It can differ also in segments. For example, millennials want different things from a credit card services than the older generations. But then, how to build the emotional connections? It's about identifying and analyzing your most connected customer. How are they different from others? What are their key motivators? So, in short, again, you need to know your customers and what drives them. But here is a case where this has been done. This is Musti and Mirri. You could also call them Charlie and Molly. So Musti and Mirri is the most popular names of cat and dog in Finland. Musti and Mirri is one of the largest pet supply stores in Finland. Few years back, they wanted to expand their offering into services. They wanted to create a grooming service for dogs, which would differentiate them from the competitors. They wanted it to be something new and different, and something that would fit into their strategic goals. Their mission is to create more fun, safe, and effortless life for pets and their family members. Their customer value proposition is to offer individual and warm service experience for pets and their families. So these strategic goals were the starting point. Now you see where this is going. First, when they started creating the service and did some qualitative research, they noticed that one of the key motivators in an excellent grooming experience was the positive and empathetic approach towards the dog by the person who's grooming the dog. I was interviewing Hanna Sieppi, who was one of the leads in producing this service, and she described this really funny by telling how the interaction between the dog owner and the groomer goes. And the groomer says, "Oh, he's so lovely," meaning the dog, of course. "I noticed that he was a little tensed at first, but after a while he relaxed and everything went so nicely." And this is a perfect example on how the point is to concentrate on the dog's experience and not how the fur was cut or groomed. This is why they see at Musti and Mirri that this is the grooming service where empathy is more important tool than the scissors. Musti and Mirri, after these first experiences, decided to design this service so that they'll spend more time when they are receiving the dog, and then afterwards when returning the dog to its owner. So they're spending more time in communicating with the dog owner and less time in the actual grooming. And I think it's needless to say that this has been a success both from the business and from the customer experience point of view. So really, really nice example there. Then the third one. I believe that the meaning and impact of managing emotions is growing. According to Forbes, emotional connection is the biggest customer experience trend in the 20s. And now the pandemic has even further accelerated the demand of customer experiences with emotional connection. But it's not really just about customer experience and emotional connection with the brand, but also understanding the meaning of emotions through all the megatrends. So, what I'm talking about here is that emotional connection is recognized as a meta trend, a trend that is cutting through all megatrends. So it's kind of like change that changes change. So there's no avoiding about the significance of emotions, emotional intelligence, or ability to manage emotions or understand one's own or others' feelings. Emotion design and creating emotional connection is here to stay. Therefore, it's something one needs to learn. It's also useful for everybody as individuals. When there is more data about our emotions and behavior, there is also a possibility that this knowledge is used in an unethical way or to create behavior that serves the purpose of for a certain group. So we need to be kind of alert on this. Designing emotions in customer touchpoints and managing emotions in a target-oriented way is not a simple task. Succeeding needs systematic work, knowledge of customers' behavior and expectations, and also taking care of the personnel's well-being. Managing emotions does not mean the same thing as controlling emotions. For example, you can't restrict emotions, for example, by saying that you can't express that you can express only certain emotions at the workplace, for example. This does not mean that you can behave badly, but it's allowing everyone to express also negative emotions like fear or frustrations. Emotions is part of being a human, and they also differentiate us from the machines. One interesting approach is also the cooperation between machines and people. We are going to be working side by side with machines more and more in the future. Our abilities complete each other quite well. Machines give us an opportunity to concentrate on what we are good and even help us to be better in that. So, in my last slide, I thought I'd raise a few thoughts on human to machine or machine to human, which way around anyway. One quite obvious spot for our cooperation is the customer service situation. Machines can help us in recognizing and interpreting customer emotions and help in operating in the situations accordingly. In other words, they can help us to help us in a way of what to say or how to handle different kind of customer service situations. Machines can recognize emotions out of our expressions, gestures, voice, words we are using, or even how we are typing. And this knowledge could be added with other information, such as how we move in the store, or what kind of pulse rate we have, or anything you can really imagine. You might have a shopping basket for that with sensors, so it can sense our pulse and knows how we are moving in the store. So when you get frustrated and when you can't find a certain product, the basket might give a signal to a salesperson who will come and help you. So it will help you also as a consumer. We also might have services and games which adapt based on our emotions. So fridge can propose you food, or car suggests that you are too tired to drive. It might also take over if you fall asleep while driving. There are already video games which adapt based on players' feelings. We are talking more and more with avatars who also produce content for social media already. Maybe soon marketing could be targeted for people who are in the perfect mood for that particular ad. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that emotion technologies evolve really fast. We will connect more and do more business with machines, which appear more and more human-like. And at last, I will also take this opportunity to remind that we need to also start the conversation about the ethical issues that comes kind of a side product here. Where do we draw the lines for using emotions when we want to influence our customers' behavior? Or where we use machines to detect our emotions? And when do we need to tell our customers or maybe personnel about it? How would you feel if your employer would check your camera, using your camera to check your emotional status through the computer that you're using? So these last thoughts about also the ethical issues here. Thank you.
It was really interesting, Minna. Thank you so much for sharing this information. As a marketing person, it makes me even think that, wow, how powerful tools we will have.
Exactly. And a bit scary as well.
Exactly. And it even starts being a little bit scary and thinking that we probably want to update our privacy policies almost annually there will definitely be global rules, or European or US, or like location specific rules also for ruling it. It's really interesting. But hey, let's give a word to Jaakko now to take it forward, and let's see what Jaakko has to share with us about emotion experience, and more specifically how emotion experience can be measured and managed. So Jaakko, share us a little bit about yourself as well as first, but I can say, as I mentioned already, that Jaakko is an awarded CX leader. Also, he is author and has written a book like Minna. So definitely a CX pioneer here again with us. So excited to hear more.
All right, thank you, Eveli, for the introduction, making me blush here. As you know, being a humble Finn, it makes it hard to kind of like praise oneself in that way. But pretty much from my background experience, first of all, hi everyone, and great to meet you. If we haven't already crossed paths before. And my name is Jaakko, and I'm from also from Finland, and now here from my nice home office. You know, I have a background in CX for about 12 years right now. So I have done a lot of things from academic research into practical implications, with about 400 CX cases and practices and programs around the globe, from Fortune 500 companies up until to one person entrepreneurial companies. So I have a pretty vast view and experience on all customer experience related and business development related from that side. But as the time is of an essence, let's jump into the topic, my topic at hand, which essentially is a little bit closer to the practice of emotional experience, and inside of emotional experience of trying to understand and show one way of actually measuring and managing your emotional experiences from your business perspective. Now, the story begins from a very historical times, where we already have had customer feedback coming in a certain forms, I would say. And I just love this example about almost 4,000 years old clay temple or tablet, you know, writing down that the copper was not on the level that it should have been. So the basic concept has been there for a long time for businesses. But what has changed lately is that changed completely how we do business, and nobody could imagine that how we do business nowadays would be the same way as we did on the 90s or in the 80s. Some of the main principles might be the same, but in the end, the customer and the purchasing behavior has drastically changed. Now we're much more on a world where our value, emotions, and all the other factors around that is driving the purchasing behavior, rather than just saying that, okay, this is the price, or going for the cheapest one, or going for something that is the closest. And of course, digitalization has changed that. So we've come into a situation where we are actually measuring and trying to understand our customer and the experiences, and especially purchasing behavior, based on methodologies and theories that were developed 20, 30, 40, or even more years ago. Even though that our purchasing behavior and businesses have drastically changed already over past 10 years. Now, of course, it is a good thing that you know, we have some, you know, steadiness and continuum, but in the end, these measurements are starting to lose value because they're not able to predict what we need to do with our businesses, but also to drive value, to really try to understand what the customer is doing. So what we went out and wanted to try and see is to understand what the winners were doing on the side of customer experience, like the companies that actually are growing and using customer experience as their competitive edge. Now, they had one common factor, and the common factor was that they were, all of them were building customer equity. And with saying customer equity, I mean that they were proactively investing into the customer, understanding them, and building the services with the strategies with the customer in mind, which means that they're not only reacting to the customer feedback, but they're also proactively trying to do better with the customer in heart. Now, of course, the question is that how to actually be more customer oriented and building customer equity, and what those companies were doing to actually make that happen. So 3 things were found, what these companies were doing and also investing into future. So basically, these 3 things are one of the biggest things, very practical stuff that are what they're pushing forward in the future. So first of all of them were already at this point very customer journey oriented. They understood that, you know, customer experience it doesn't equal customer service, for example. But the entire experience, it starts from marketing, building the brand and the brand image, building the expectations for the customer, and then going forward from there all the way to the loyalty cycle. Hopefully, you know, coming back and telling your friends and colleagues and so forth and so forth. So that was one of the key elements there. Then the second was definitely that they were trying somehow over and or beyond or from the side of the conventional KPIs of, let's say, customer satisfaction or customer experience. They were trying to understand customers' emotion, their emotional state, how that affected purchasing behavior, and they were doing that across the journey, at least on some extent. Now, this is a very important notion that actually, based on the understanding what we have, it's about 8% of companies to date are actually doing this. But from the ones that are using and growing most from the customer experience perspective, almost 69% of these people or these companies are using, you know, looking into the emotional experience. So we can see a drastic change between companies that are actually, you know, growing and you know, companies that are not. And then the third part was a little bit more, I would say, a little bit more technical oriented and a little bit more organizational oriented than customer oriented, because of course the first 2 ones are customer oriented. Now, they almost each and every one of the companies were telling us that they're trying to somehow quantify that ROI and quantify that emotional or customer experience underlying, meaning that they're trying to attach different kind of, let's say, for example, sales data into the customer experience data to really see how that affects, how that experience has affected to sales and the really bottom line of the company. So that is a huge trend, and that's, you know, will keep going along the way. And then what was kind of like cutting all of these and underlining each one of these 3 was the kind of like the effective personalization. But that's kind of that's a little bit of an old news already, but now we're kind of like gaining a little bit more understanding and tools to actually do that as well. And the reason why these actually popped up was the fact that it seems that these 4 are very much amplifying each other, right? So each one of them alone are already powerful methodologies and approaches to customer experience and bringing value to the company, to the strategy, and growing the company over their competition. But in the end, when using all of these 4, you know, the end results were even, you know, bigger and better than before. Now, I'm not going to go on this too much. Minna already had a very, very good, you know, value explanation behind that. So we can already understand that the value of and the impact of the value of customer, understanding customers' emotions are very high. Now, this said, when we're coming into today's world, it is really important that we could find a way to understand in a quantified way, and in a larger corporate level, but also on a customer level, but also in a comparable way, we could understand customers' emotions. And for that, the market has introduced EVI, as in Emotional Value Index. What we wanted to talk about a little bit more today. And the reason for this is that to this point, it is the only very much comparable KPI that is fairly simple to use and measure, which consists of kind of like the emotional scale and measures emotional experience over being just like something for very specific like NPS or customer satisfaction. Now, before digging a little bit deeper into, so for people who for whom EVI is not too familiar, I'm just going to go quickly through how it works and from a structural perspective. So collecting the EVI data or collecting data for EVI is essentially trying to understand the emotion of the customer in a certain touch point. The question is very much static, but then you just add the point that the emotion is towards to. And this is very crucial because for us to really able to say that, okay, this is what I feel about something, is that we need to be very specific on what it is. If we ask very general questions, it's really hard to get accurate data. And then secondly, it is really important to use it in a circular way of collecting the data, because we can see that, for example, in NPS, NPS is giving us survey bias when it's a very linear, and the person who actually keeps the data sees and understands which one is better and which one is worse. But like Minna mentioned earlier, in emotional states and emotional sphere, it doesn't always necessarily mean that very positive or very negative emotion is in a linear way, better than the other. So that's kind of like what the point here is, and we can also feel very indifferent about things. So that's why it is important to kind of keep regardless of where or which, if you use software or not, but regardless of that, it's very important to go for and understand the emotion on a circular way when measuring. Then the second part, and don't worry, I'm going to share this to everyone afterwards so you guys can go dig a little bit deeper into the theory, is the clustering phase, where we cluster, so categorize emotions and then give them the value to actually calculate the index. And the value for the index comes from the amplitude of impact to your business from that specific emotion, coming from theoretical research on and from the real world, essentially, like how much of an impact that emotion has into your purchase behavior and spend. Then creating the emotional value index, which essentially is an indexed KPI between -100 and 100, which is a very similar to NPS-like approach to make it a little bit easier to understand. It can be also with a different scale coming up, for example, from 0 to 1, but essentially we've been using more on the minus 1 or -100 to +100, because it just makes it easier to understand and comprehend. Now, of course, the question is that what does this tell you? And eventually EVI tells you that if you are creating the emotions that drives your strategy to grow, or if you're creating emotions that are driving your customers to churn and you going against your strategy. So this is kind of like a fairly simple framework to understand, but then of course going deeper into the characteristics of EVI is very important to understand. Now, one of the good points about EVI definitely is that you can use it pre and post purchase, and it would essentially feel crazy to try to measure NPS before you have done business with a company or organization, right? So asking something like that, or asking customer satisfaction before that. But with an EVI, as EVI is always attached, and emotion is always attached to brands, you can measure basically EVI through the entire customer journey. And then second, a very big good characteristic of EVI is that it can be tactical to attach to certain touch points, but it is also a strategic measurement at the same time, because it's considering the entire business, and you can measure it in each point of your customer journeys, regardless of the customer journey. So that is also definitely a good thing using the EVI. Now, yes, and kind of like yet another great pyramid, as Erica, thank you mentioning there. EVI can be also used on a different level, from individual to customer journey to transactional to all the way to the strategic level. And how this usually works is that we kind of like combine that information, and depends on which level we evaluate and analyze it. It depends on what you can do with the data, and also how you can utilize that. And I have a practical example of this coming up in just about a minute. Now, then there's also a big question, like, why should I consider EVI, for example, over NPS or customer satisfaction? Now, my message usually is that you shouldn't just try to think of a one KPI that takes over everything. Of course, EVI has characteristics of actually doing that, because you can measure it through the entire customer journey. But when we're looking at how experiences are built, and based on recent studies, the effect of again, to purchase behavior, like adding more money, below the end line, is the point. So we're always looking at the effect into will these things grow or not grow sales. So actually, recommendation, essentially NPS, is only part of the experience that affects that behavior, whereas emotional experience kind of like covers that entirety. So we can also see other things like customer satisfaction for the product and service is about 1/3 of that. NPS is about 1/3, and then checkout experience and service giving to the customer are considering the 1/3 of the emotion that is covered. So definitely, for this reason, essentially, we always recommend using EVI at least as the first KPI, because it has a good and very big impact to your business from purchase behavior perspective. Now, I also gobbled together and smushed a couple of bigger retail cases that I've been working with from an EVI perspective. Now, one of the main problems for these companies have always been, or recently, is that the more conventional KPIs like NPS and customer satisfaction score has not been able to predict the customer behavior anymore. So saying that, would you recommend, and then actually ask a recommend, only a fraction of those customers who say that I would recommend is actually recommending. Or on another study that we conducted, we're looking for people who say that they would recommend, and then we were looking that did they actually recommend over a certain period of time, and again, fraction actually did. So trying to look for a more comprehensive KPI to understand the experience was kind of like the main point, what we're trying to do there. And I kind of like put together a little bit on the results. You can see them there from the first 6 to 12 months of working with EVI. For those numbers are on average from 3 companies. But essentially what was done there is a holistic view for all the areas and all the levels of measuring and understanding the customer, from the individual level to customer journey level to very much on the touch point level. Now, on the individual level, the EVI data was automated and brought into the CRM. So everyone on the customer-facing services like customer service and support, they could always see the latest emotional state for each customer touch point when they were working with the customer. So they could actually take that into an account and use that as that emotional data into their advantage when working with the customer. Now, coming into the very lowest level here, which is the very transactional level, is that the collection of the customer experience data, and here EVI data was distributed to each one of those touch points, and then built as customer journeys. You can then measure your customer journey through the customer journey, and then compare each touch point to each other with the same KPI, right? Because this wasn't possible before, so you are not able to understand that are you actually fulfilling the expectations of the customer or not, because prior you're measuring marketing or marketing efficiency or expectations with a different thing. And then on the other hand, for example, NPS or customer satisfaction, those measurements are not comparable. So you're kind of like unable to understand if you are actually working through the expectations of the customer. So this is very important. And then we could actually go for, and as Minna mentioned, targeting marketing based on emotions is pretty much one of the first things that on the case what we did with an awesome results. So let's say that if you were based on your emotional state, would you need to take or would it be better to send an offer with a higher priced product, or would you need to send them a discounted offer? It is a very different thing for different people on different emotional states. So these kind of things can be already done there, and with the help of the, for example, EVI data. Now, as we are, running, I think I'm already just a minute over time. So in the heart of EVI is that it forces you and your business to bring that customer into the heart of your business strategy. Now, of course, it should go in, and you would need to start from your strategy and try to think that what kind of emotions we need to evoke within our customer base throughout the customer journey. And no, those might not be the same emotions to support our strategy, right? So that is definitely the big question. And then only you come down back as, thinking, okay, this is also a tactical thing for us. And if you have, for example, set a level of something that our customer support, for example, would need to go for, or customer service or sales, the people can always see it themselves. And that's one of the big good points of EVI. I think I was running quite quickly here, but the good thing is I'm going to share everything, and any questions that might come up, please do share. If you're more interested in Emotional Value Index, please go ahead and check out emotionalvalueindex.com. If you're interested in licensing or looking into more like how do you want to use it or how to use it, just send me a message or book a time with me, or go in and straight connect through emotionalvalueindex.com, and someone will definitely get in touch with you if the actual methodology or concept is interesting. But that's from my side. Thank you for your time, and it's been a pleasure. There's never enough time on these, unfortunately, but I'm happy to continue discussions with you guys around EVI or customer experience in general.
Thank you, Jaakko. It was again another very interesting presentation. And everybody, please feel free to write your questions now to the chat, for example, on the right, so that we can start taking the questions as well one by one, or you can write straight to the questions section as well. That's how it was just done by Larry, for example. And thank you, Jaakko. Thank you again, Minna, for inspiring presentations. But actually, before we go to Q&A, I would have a question to our audience that you could answer as well. So it now popped up also in the chat, and this now gives a little bit time for you to think about questions, write them there, and also perhaps the poll question also helps you to ask more interesting questions from us. So the question is that, are you planning to measure emotional experience during the next 6 to 12 months. So you have now heard more about the emotion experience, how it can be measured as well, and what do you think? Are you planning doing it? We'll get back to discussing the poll results as well, but just to give you time now to write questions and answer the poll as well, then quickly showing that we also have special offers for the webinar participants. I will share with you information over email, but you also have actually special discount for Minna's as well as for Jaakko's amazing books about emotion experience and about the journeys, customer journeys then. And then another great opportunity is meeting with Jaakko. We asked Jaakko to free some time in his calendar to help you guys explore more how emotion experience could be measured, or if it's something for your business. And you can book a meeting with Jaakko right away at the offers section. And actually this opportunity popped up already during the presentation. And it's also now in the chat, and you can do it right away. But again, I will share with you a link afterward as well. But alrighty, let's jump now to the Q&A. I also need to apologize that we are going now over time, or we are already. But since we have very interesting questions again that need to be answered, then we will answer some of them, and then we might answer also some of them over email afterwards. So just feel free to write any questions and we will answer them for sure. And also just a reminder that this webinar is recorded. So if you need to leave, then you can listen to the webinar recording afterward as well. But definitely we, of course, suggest to stay with us if you have this opportunity. Alrighty, but let's now see what questions we have there. So at the very beginning of the presentations, actually, Isabella asked from Minna that could you please share the quotes that you shared with us during presentation. That was very beginning of your presentation, and I believe that I will share also these over email so that they will be sent there if there is interest. So
yeah, sure, of course.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Share them then with me and I will share them forward. Now, Larry has a question that have any of you analyzed whether it's better to measure emotion experience using open-ended versus closed-ended questions? So maybe, Jaakko, what if we start with you?
Sure. From my perspective and from what I've learned and understood, there's a pretty straightforward answer to this. If possible, always use both. And for the reason for this is pretty much the same as for any customer experience, understanding customer or customer experience. They give you different kind of information. So always should be using both. And if you have an opportunity to use some AI tools that actually are further analyzing the open-ended data, always the better. But they're also should be careful on what kind of services you're using, because not each and every one of them are very emotional oriented. So if you're using just like I'm going to say a basic and the emotion underlying. But I would always recommend both if possible. But of course, there might be some there might be different kind of situations for it. User experience you might have on this field.
Yeah. I understand. Was it so that with the EVI, it's so that the first question is always the circle question, and then the next question can be open-ended question. So actually, they both can be used, and then they can be analyzed, cross-analyzed. Correlations can be drawn like this.
Yeah. So and that was kind of like what I meant there. So always, for example, if using EVI, it's good to use the EVI specifically, and EVI data can be driven even from a facial recognition data, but in the end, by using the clustering and so forth and so forth. But in the end, it's always good to try to understand both ends anyway.
Mm-hmm. Now, Minna, do you have any thoughts to add to this as well? Or,
no, I agree with Jaakko, definitely. Then I have a background as a qualitative researcher, so I always flagging on that. If you want to have deep information on your customers, so use qualitative methods, and especially in the starting point of your journey on understanding the emotional connection and how to do that, it's really important to have the qualitative data.
Yes,
definitely. And maybe it would be good to open up a little bit about this as well. That what do you mean by qualitative surveys, questions, or methods?
Talking to customer, looking how they do things, being present when they're using the service, just observing, and anything that produces the deep kind of information, not just numbers.
Right. So next, Emma would like to know how EVI could be used, or emotion experience could be measured for government services. Any thoughts on this? That's probably specifically to Jaakko. Do you?
Yeah, sure. I think the easiest way I can attach to the materials a couple of slides and cases from the public sector, how emotional experience is being utilized on that side, but in a very short. The methodology and the approach is very much the same. For the reason that the emotional sphere is always the same, but of course we need to understand that EVI and emotional experience is only capable of measuring, or of course it's capable of measuring other stuff as well, but it's basically designed for a service or business or some sort of transaction. So let's say that if you go into a governmental office to get a service, that it suits for that basically, but it doesn't suit for trying to understand your personal relationship emotions in a sense. So there would just need to understand that it's good for services, it's good for public services as well, and there especially it's actually amplified. What most people don't understand is actually in business to business environments and public services, emotional experience and measuring EVI is actually showing more connection into the value drivers than on, let's say, for example, traditional retail. So it's even better and more efficient tool on public sector and B2B than on other levels.
Yeah, next, let's take a question from Veini. So he's wondering if customer emotions are actually a guaranteed way to predict behavior, considering that emotions can be very volatile. So it would be really nice to hear some thoughts on this as well. I think it's a very interesting question. Minna, what do you think about this? Which thoughts does it raise?
I don't know what's Jaakko going to say. He's representing a different perspective than I. As a researcher, I would see that it's totally right observation. They are volatile. I don't know if that's the right word, but they do change, and we have different backgrounds and different experience, so that's all connected. So you can't really predict, but of course they give us direction, and there are certain things that keep appearing time from time. So not predicting, but give way definitely.
Yeah, that was actually, well said. I come from a little bit different angle for the prediction part. I actually know that we can predict. We definitely can, but you never should say that. Is it guaranteed? Should never say that in a sense. But the underlying thing actually was what Minna mentioned there. We just need to understand the underlying variables. So, for example, culture. So you can't do the same thing in Finland, you can't do the same thing in Mexico, and can't do the same thing in China, and so forth. So you would need to understand, for example, starting point, even from, if we translate the emotions, name of the emotions, it might mean completely different thing in Finland, Sweden, US, and Asia, right? So these are the things that we just need to consider. And if the data points and the data volume is big enough, we can already see attachments to especially to kind of like hard variables. So let's say that if we have a soft variable, which is emotion, on the other end, and hard variables like sales or other operational goal, that actually we can predict quite well. And we don't see a huge, differences in between those. But we just need to understand that we can't use data from certain different industry to go over, I don't know, supermarket and shipbuilding are in different emotional states. So we have to separate those, not to make any mistakes on the predictions. But we're getting there. So I think Minna's put it well. Giving the direction at this point, I think that's a good way of going right or left or what that is.
Yeah, and isn't it so that it tends to be very similar, at least with other KPIs like NPS and other CX methodologies as well, that you can't take the ship industry learnings and results and benchmarks and then put them to another industry context, right? So have to
exactly. So and compared to other KPIs like CSAT or NPS, and if we do the same thing and attach that information into sales data, we can actually see that emotion is about 2 or 3 times has more power to predict what's going to happen than, for example, customer satisfaction data only. So in that sense, it is not the perfect way to predict, but it's much more accurate than, for example, customer satisfaction data alone.
Very nice. So let's see what else we have here. So I think a question from Erica is actually connected to what we just discussed, but that's probably one of the last questions we can take now here as well, since we are very, very heavily now over time. But it's a very interesting question. So every person has very unique ways of responding to a situation or a response from a company or agent. So how do we measure EVI, as this is unique to every person, or is it? So Jaakko, what do you think about this?
Shortly put, yes, each and every one of us are different, but from our emotional states towards business and towards purchase behavior, we're not that different. Like Minna mentioned, usually if you're angry, you tend to act in a certain way. If you are afraid, you tend to act in a certain way. If you're happy, you tend to act in a certain way. So when we take a bigger amount of people, then it doesn't change too much. But of course, again, cultural and industry differences apply. So that need to be remembered, not to mix them with each other. But again, nothing is 100% accurate. But in the end, it is possible to use the same framework of measuring the emotional experience and still kind of go by through different industries, for example.
Very nice. So we do have interesting questions here. Let's take this as the last one. That it's a very philosophical question as well, I think, but it's very honest question. That how are you measuring and validating prediction, or we were talking about that it gives a prediction, gives away. So what about measuring and validating this prediction?
If we're talking about, for example, EVI or any other KPI from CX perspective, one of the best ways, what I always feel validating actually, that is that if over time, just track back. So the best way, if you have a technology at your disposal which actually can track what customer has said and how they have acted. So let's say that what kind of emotional state they had in the early part of the customer journey, or what they did, and then tracks what they actually bought, how much they bought, and how that works. So what we can, for example, say is that if you are enthusiastic versus disappointed, on average, on high value retail, you would spend about twice what you would spend on the other case. So in a sense, it's fairly easy if there is a technology in place. If you're not able to track it, then it gets really difficult, because then you would do a survey after survey over time, and it would be really hard to track back to the same answer what the person gave last time. But that's also possible.
Very, very nice. So I think we need to sum it up for today now. But are there any last words that you would like to share with our audience? We still have actually many people here right now in real time joining us, listening us as well. So what do you think, Minna? Will emotions change the world and change the CX industry during the next years?
Yes, I definitely think so. And the technology that is helping us in managing with the emotions. But I would encourage everybody just to get to know emotions, how they work. How can I know better my own emotions and somebody else's emotions, to know how they feel and reflect on a little bit how to behave on those. So I would encourage everybody to do that.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's the same thing. And I would rephrase the question or comment that Evely you mentioned. I think it already has, like regardless if we want to, if we're talking about measuring customer experience or managing our businesses, emotion is already driving our purchase behavior more than anything else. So it's already there, and it already has been for years. So in the end, whether we like it or not, it's already here. It has already changed. But now from the measuring perspective and business perspective, we're just opening a little bit on what we understand and know on what we do. So it's already here. It has already changed everything. And those companies who are actually trying to do something and understanding, those are already thriving. So already here, I would say.
Yeah, so as an end note, I would suggest you also take action and start thinking how you can measure emotion experience, how you can measure emotions that drive your sales. And you can make very surprising, you can find really surprising results, and you can find that it can be a game changer for your business. And that's definitely a really interesting and a hot topic today in the CX industry. So thank you everybody for your time today. And as promised, you will receive a recording, you will receive the slides as well, and you will receive also a couple of great links over email. So that you can book meetings with Jaakko to explore further how you can put the emotion experience measurement in practice in your business. And you can then also purchase Minna's book or also Jaakko's book. So thanks so much for everybody's time. Thank you, Minna. It was amazing to have you here again.
It was great to be here.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.